At the very end of Mass today, before the final blessing, we'll have just a short period of Eucharistic adoration. We did this last month on the first Sunday of the month. We'll do it for the rest of the year, once a month. Just a little opportunity to spend some time with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. So just a few announcements now instead of at the end of the Mass. This Tuesday is the Solemnity of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, a holy day of obligation for us. So here at St. Francis Xavier, we'll have 4 Masses that day, 7 a.m., 12:10, 5:30, and 7:30 in Spanish. And there'll be confessions at midday and then both Masses in the evening. And then also after Mass today, just as last week, there's a chance to register for anything with kids related to pre-K through 12th grade, confirmation, First Communion, as well as RCIA. So anybody wanting to know more about the Catholic faith, our program is called Becoming Catholic. So those of you who maybe aren't Catholic or maybe been away from your faith for a while and you want to know more, you want to come back, that'll be meeting on Tuesday night starting August 22nd. So all that information available in the narthex. We've all by now heard of the term distracted driving, when whether it's your phone or the radio or the people in your car and you're driving, but you're distracted, you're not looking at the road. Another new term has developed lately, and it's called distracted walking. I was sent a video a couple weeks ago, just a little 2-minute video, and it was just people walking into things. So a guy looking at his phone, and he walked through a glass door. A guy walking in a shopping mall, head in his phone, right into a fountain. Perhaps more seriously, a woman on a pier on the beach, and she walked right off the pier. They had to call in the Coast Guard to rescue her. Perhaps more serious than that, a gentleman walking, and there was a fire truck, lights on, sirens on, head and phone, and he walked right into the fire truck. Distracted walking. This happens when we're looking at something and we ought to be looking at something else. Head down instead of our head up. That distraction happens to us in our regular lives, but it's also very much a spiritual problem. And that is very, very often in our life of prayer, in just our life of work, in the life of our families, in the life of our parish, we're walking around distracted, heads down, heads in phones. This is not an anti-phone homily, but a lot of times it's that phone that is that distraction. And our eyes are not where they ought to be on the road or on the couple steps in front of us so we don't walk off a pier. We are a distracted people. But luckily, this is not a new problem. Peter got distracted. He's on the boat. There's a big storm. They're in the middle of this lake, a very large lake. It's late at night. They see what they think is a ghost. It's really Jesus. Jesus has come to help them. So Peter, to make sure that it's Jesus, he says, Jesus, let me get outside the boat and walk on the water. Jesus says, okay. So Peter gets out of the boat, and he's walking on water. But the storm is still going on around him, and it scares him. The scriptures tell us that Peter is frightened. And when he's frightened, he gets distracted. When he's distracted, he begins to sink. That's what happens in our spiritual life when we get distracted. We take our eyes off of Jesus, we take our eyes off our faith, and we begin to sink. Our spiritual lives are not what we want them to be, not what they ought to be. And a lot of that is that we're looking elsewhere. We're distracted. We take our eyes off Jesus. Well, Peter did something very good. as he was sinking, he didn't just resign himself to sink. We do this often in our spiritual life where we think, I'm not where I want to be, and I guess I'm just going to have to stay here because I'm stuck. I guess I'm just going to have to stay here because this is the way it's always going to be. We think that sometimes about our bad habits, about particular sins that plague us over and over and over again. We sometimes think, this is part of me. This sin is kind of who I am, and I'm always going to have it. But that's a lie. It's a lie that the devil tells us over and over and over again, that you are your sin. That wherever you are in your spiritual life, if it's not in a good place, you're going to just have to stay there. Well, Peter doesn't believe that. Peter is sinking, and he does something. It's a good example for the rest of us when we're sinking, when life is maybe a little bit out of control, when our spiritual life is not where we want it to be. Peter says 3 words, Lord, save me. He cries out to Jesus. And what does Jesus do? Jesus saves him. In one way, that's pretty simple. Lord, save me. Okay, take my hand. I got you. So often, we get kind of in that spiral of sin or that spiral of just kind of lukewarmness that can oftentimes overtake our lives. And we just think this is the way it's going to be for the next 50 years. This is the way it's going to be until something outside of me changes it. But Peter is a great example for us. He simply speaks the name of Jesus. He says, Lord, save me. And Jesus saves him. Peter got distracted because he took his eyes off of Jesus. Does that describe you? In the course of your week, even when you're at Mass, in the course of a regular old day, how often are your eyes fixed on Jesus? How often in difficult times do we think to ourselves this kind of old sort of American theme, I need to pull myself up by my bootstraps. I have this problem that I caused, and I need to fix it. But the great spiritual principle is that we cannot save ourselves. We cannot. Who saves us? Jesus. When Peter was sinking, when Peter was drowning, he said, Lord, save me. When we're sinking, when we're drowning, when our spiritual lives are not what we want them to be, when our life in general is not what we want them to be, what do? So often we think, I just need to work harder and I'll get out of this. I just need to do this or do that or do this. When in fact, the answer to every problem of the human heart is Jesus Christ. The answer to every question of the human heart is Jesus Christ. And so wherever you are, at the beginning of this new school year, perhaps a time of new beginnings for you, maybe you just moved here, maybe you just started coming back to Mass, wherever you are, let's take Peter as this beautiful example. He got in trouble. He took his eyes off Jesus, but he corrected it by calling out, Lord, save me. Wherever you are, however you got here today, whatever's going on in your life, we take 2 things from today. Let's keep our eyes on Jesus in the week ahead. Let's have a life of prayer. Here we are at Mass, the opportunity to receive him and to be in his presence. Let's keep our eyes on Jesus. And then when we get into those moments where we're distracted, when we take our eyes off of him, we cry out to the Lord to save us. We cannot save ourselves. Peter got in trouble. Lord, save me. These are the words of a disciple. These are the words of a Christian. Those are not words of weakness. Those are words of great strength. May you and I be strong in the week ahead, crying out to Jesus who saves us.